This key issue talks about states, but what are states? Well, state is an area organized into a political unit and ruled by an established government with control over their internal and foreign affairs. The word country is a synonym for state, and the term state doesn't apply to the 50 regional governments of the US. They are subdivisions. Currently, Russia, Canada, the United States, China, Brazil, and Australia are the sixth largest states by land area. In contrast, there are microstates where most are islands, like the Barbados, Seychelles, or Solomon Islands. Regions like Polynesia, Micronesia, and Melanesia are made up of mostly islands. All states have sovereignty, which is independence from control of their internal affairs by other states. There is some disagreement about how many states there actually are in the world because of regions which may or may not actually be states, like Korea. In the peninsula of Korea, it is split into the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, or North Korea, and the Republic of Korea, or South Korea. After the USA and the USSR beat Japan in World War II, they divided Korea. The Soviet Union installed a pro-communist government in the north, while a pro-US government was created in the south. North Korea tried invading the south in 1950, making a 3-year war, ending in a ceasefire. Both want to reunite, but both claim they're the one that should exercise sovereignty over the whole peninsula. North Korea is one of the world's most isolated and poorest countries, and has built and tested nuclear weapons and missiles, despite lacking the ability to provide citizens with food, electricity, and other basic needs. Another example is the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic, also known as Western Sahara, being recognized by most African countries as a sovereign state. However, Morocco claims it and built a 1,700-mile wall around it to prove it and keep out rebels. Its independence was declared by the Polisario Front and recognized by most African countries, but Morocco and Mauritania annexed the northern and southern portions. Mauritania withdrew 3 years later, but Morocco claimed all of its territory. Morocco controls most of the populated area, but the Polisario Front operates in the deserts. Another example is the dispute between China and Taiwan. Most countries consider China and Taiwan as separate and sovereign states. China claims that Taiwan isn't sovereign but a part of China, and Taiwan agrees. Their status arises from a Chinese civil war in the late 1940s between the nationalists and communists. Nationalist leaders fled to Taiwan and proclaimed they were still the actual rulers of China. The US supported the nationalists in the Civil War, so Americans opposed, thinking that China was firmly under control of the communists. They continued to regard nationalists as the rulers of China until the 1970s, when the UN transferred China's seat from the nationalists to the communists. Another example are the Senkaku or Diaoyu Islands having conflicting claims. China, Taiwan, and Japan all claim sovereignty over multiple small uninhabited islands in the East China Sea. They are referred to as different names in different countries. They are called the Diaoyu Islands in China, the Diaoyutai Islands in Taiwan, and the Senkaku Islands in Japan. Japan has controlled the islands since 1895, except 1945 through 1972, when the US administered them after beating Japan in World War II. China and Taiwan claimed the islands belonged to them until Japan illegally seized them in 1895. Japan says China didn't state they had sovereignty of the islands until in 1895, when Japan claimed them. China and Japan have made air defense zones in the East China Sea to bolster their claim. Ancient states and medieval states both relate to the history of the concept of political states and their developments, and here's how. The development of states in ancient times can be traced to a region of Southwest Asia called the Fertile Crescent. The eastern end of the crescent, Mesopotamia, was centered in the valley formed by the Tigris and Euphrates River in present-day Iraq. I meant by rivers, sorry. The first states to evolve in Mesopotamia were known as city-states, in which a city-state is a sovereign state that comprises a town and the surrounding countryside. An example today can be Singapore. Political unity in the ancient world reached its height with the establishment of the Roman Empire, controlling most of Europe, North Africa, and Southwest Asia, from modern-day Spain to Iran and from Egypt to England. The Roman Empire collapsed in the 5th century after a series of attacks by people living on its frontiers and because of internal disputes. The European portion of the Roman Empire was fragmented into a large number of estates owned by competing kings, dukes, barons, and other nobles. A handful of powerful kings emerged as rulers over large numbers of these European states beginning around the year 1100. The consolidation of neighboring estates under the unified control of a king formed the basis for the development of such modern European states as England, France, and Spain. There is a clear-cut difference between nations and states. A state is an area organized into a political unit, while a nation is a large group of people who are united by common cultural characteristics like language and ethnicity or by shared history. A nation-state is a state whose territory corresponds to that occupied by a particular nation, like Japan. The cataclysmic events of World War I and World War II had a major impact on new nation-states in Europe, and here's how. After World War I, engulfing nearly all of Europe, leaders of the victorious countries met at the Versailles Peace Conference to redraw the map of Europe. The goal of the Allied leaders was to divide Europe into a collection of nation-states, using language as the main criterion for identifying ethnic groups. New states were created, and the boundaries of existing states were adjusted to conform as closely as possible to the territory occupied by speakers of different languages. The attempt after World War I to divide Europe into nation-states wasn't a recipe for peace. In the 1930s, Germany's Nazis claimed that all German-speaking parts of Europe constituted one nationality and should be unified into one state. After many years of appeasing the Nazis' expansion in Central Europe, the UK and France finally declared war when the Nazis invaded Poland, clearly not a German-speaking state. Germany was divided into two states following its defeat in World War II. Two Germanys existed from 1949 until 1990. A massive forced migration of people into the newly demarcated territory of the region's various nation-states. With the end of communism, the German Democratic Republic ceased to exist, and its territory became part of the German Federal Republic. The present-day state of Germany shows little resemblance to the territory occupied by German-speaking people prior to the upheavals of the 20th century. There is no perfect nation-state because the territory occupied by a particular ethnicity never corresponds precisely to the boundaries of countries. Japan is a fairly good example of a nation-state because its population is 98.5% Japanese. Communists suppressed the issues of ethnicity and nationalism through forced assimilation policies, exemplified by Joseph Stalin's Russification in the Soviet Union and Mao Zedong's cultural reforms in China, marginalizing minority cultures. The breakup of the USSR in 1991 resulted in the conversion of the 15 republics into 15 independent states. They consist of 5 groups: the Caucasus region, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Georgia; the 3 Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania; the 3 Eastern European states, Belarus, Moldova, and Ukraine, the 5 Central Asian states, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan, and finally Russia. The ethnic distinction among Belarusians, Ukrainians, and Russians is somewhat blurred. The 3 groups speak similar East Slavic languages and trace their ethnic heritage to the same roots in medieval Europe. In Tajikistan, they have suffered from a civil war between Tajiks, who were former communists, and an alliance of Muslim fundamentalists and Western-oriented intellectuals. In Kyrgyzstan, the Kyrgyz and Uzbek have had a conflict, leading to overthrowing of multiple presidents as well as ethnic cleansing. A multinational state is a state consisting of multiple cultural groups with traditions of self-determination, agreeing to coexist peacefully by recognizing each other as distinct nationalities. Russia is an example containing 39 different ethnicities. Ukraine's minority Russian population started an uprising in the east, leading to Russia invading Crimea. Today, most countries worldwide still recognize Ukraine's sovereignty over Crimea. During the 1990s, Abkhazia fought for control of the northwestern part of Georgia and was declared an independent state. In 2008, the Ossetians gained independence from Georgia. By definition, a colony is a territory legally tied to a sovereign state rather than being totally independent. The largest remaining colonies in the world are Western Sahara, possessed by
In this clip, I'll be showing you everything you missed in Key Issue 3 of this chapter, that of which is, why do states face threats? Now, there are 6 topics shown, which I know, sounds like a lot. However, I will summarize each topic so you'll be able to retain the information much easier. First topic will be global cooperation and competition. The major key in other states' cooperation is the United Nations, which was established in 1945. The world came together after World War II. The UN was organized with 51 original members. However, the early years of the UN were dominated by an ongoing conflict between the United States and the Soviet Union. This was the Cold War era. The world had more than 2 superpowers before this era. And no, I don't mean literal superpowers, of course. We'd have a completely different outcome if that were the case. The Soviet Union, the United States were using the military to intentionally get at one with the other without bloodshed, ergo the name Cold War. Between the two, they had different ideological stances. The Soviets wanted to spread communism, and the US wanted to spread democracy through the UN. By 1962, Soviets secretly started shipping missiles to Cuba. Sir, you might want to take a look at what these guys are doing. Aw, man, that's so not cool. At this point, the Cold War almost got heated up. After a blockade was set up by the US Navy, the Soviets dismantled their missiles. By the end of the Cold War, the UN gained many members for their peacemaking agenda. The UN Security Council has 5 permanent members, including China, Russia, United Kingdom, France, and the United States. All 5 members can veto peacekeeping operations. The UN relies on individual countries' troops to maintain peace, And they have also played a key role in promoting international cooperation and human rights. A key term in this section is balance of power, which is a condition of roughly equal strengths between opposing alliances. Governing states. The learning outcome of this topic is explaining differences among three regime types. The three regime types, on a national scale to be precise, are democracy, autocracy, and anarchy. A democracy is a country in which citizens elect leaders and can run for office. For example, our country is led by a democracy. Or, for you Star Wars fans out there, think of the Galactic Republic from Star Wars before Palpatine ran it. An autocracy is a country run by the ruler's interest over the people's interest. For example, monarchs are under autocracy, like Queen Elizabeth II. Rest in peace her soul. Another example is, well, you probably guessed it, the Galactic Empire in Star Wars when Senator Palpatine became Emperor Palpatine. An anarchy is a country that is not fully democratic or autocratic. It is a mix of the two. A country that is anarchic is Russia. Weapons of mass destruction. What are weapons of mass destruction? Well, a weapon of mass destruction is a nuclear, biological, chemical, or other weapon that can kill and bring significant harm to a large number of humans or cause great damage to human-made structures, natural structures, or the biosphere. The most famous use of a nuclear weapon was the bombing of Hiroshima. This killed between 130,000 to 226,000 people. The countries with the most nuclear weapons are number 1, Russia, number 2, United States, 3, China, number 4, France, and number 5, United Kingdom, as of 2025. Israel, who denies they don't, is suspected of having nuclear weapons. Europe's fragile cooperation. There are two major alliances that were formed with Europe, an economic and military alliance. One of the economic alliances that were formed and are still together to this day is the European Union, or EU for short. The EU was formed in 1958 with only 6 members: France, Germany, Luxembourg, Belgium, Italy, and the Netherlands. The Union was originally designed to heal the scars from World War II, which was about 13 years prior. The military alliance that was formed with Europe is NATO, also known as the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. NATO is an alliance among 16 democratic states along with Canada, Europe, and the United States. Terrorist attacks against the United States. When you think terrorist, you may think of what happened during 9/11. Well, that wasn't the only terrorist attack in New York. Terrorism is defined as the threatened or actual use of illegal force and violence by a non-state actor to gain a political, economic, religious, or social goal through fear, coercion, or intimidation. Now, terrorism isn't just random. It has to be planned accordingly to the perpetrator. It has to entail some level of violence aimed at political, economic, religious, or social goal, and include some kind of message the perpetrator is trying to convey toward a bigger audience other than their immediate victims. The 9/11 attacks not only affected New York, but also included Washington, D.C., and Shanksville, Pennsylvania. The attacks would have only included D.C. and New York. However, passengers on Flight 93 fought the terrorists, and the plane crashed near the town of Shanksville. Terrorists planned to crash the Flight 93 in D.C. The group responsible for the 9/11 attacks was Al-Qaeda. There were many other attacks on the U.S., including the shooting of Colorado Springs Planned Parenthood on November 25th, 2015, and the car bombing in the World Trade Center's underground parking in 1993. The car bombing in 1993 was also Al-Qaeda's doing. And finally, terrorist organizations. While there are a lot of terrorist groups out there, the three major ones are Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, and Islamic State, also known as ISIS or ISIL. As we spoke before, Al-Qaeda was responsible for the attacks on the World Trade Center in the 90s and the early 2000s. Their leader, Osama bin Laden, issued a declaration of war against the United States in 1996 because of U.S. support for Saudi Arabia and Israel. U.S. forces killed bin Laden in 2011. Since then, Al-Qaeda has been around still, but they are declining since the death of their original leader. The Taliban took over the Afghanistan government in 2001. After multiple years of men beaten for shaving their beards, women stoned for adultery, and countless human rights violations, the U.S. led a coalition in 2001 to overthrow the Taliban. In 2020, when the U.S. left Afghanistan, the Taliban resumed their horrors, and it's still ongoing to this day. Islamic State, or better known as ISIS, started in 1999 and was an affiliate to Al-Qaeda in 2004. Their goal is to impose strict religious laws throughout Asia. They are known for beheadings, massacre, torture, and other human rights violations. They have had success in recruitment through the internet/social media. The presence in northern Iraq and Syria has dropped from 40% to 2% as of 2018.
Have you ever looked at a map and wondered why countries or states are shaped the way they are? These shapes aren't random. They actually impact how a state functions, communicates, and even how united or divided its people feel. Let's start with the types of state shapes. Compact states are almost circular, where the distance from the center to any boundary is about the same. This shape is efficient for communication and defense. Examples include Poland and Burundi. Elongate states, like Chile or Italy, stretch out in a long, narrow form. These can face issues with communication across regions, and some parts might feel isolated from the center. Prorupted states. These are mostly compact, but have a large extension sticking out. This can give access to resources or serve as a buffer between other states. Thailand and the Democratic Republic of Congo are good examples. Perforated states are states that completely surround another country. South Africa, which surrounds Lesotho, is a classic example. Fragmented states. These are states that are made up of scattered pieces, sometimes separated by water or other countries. Indonesia, the Philippines, and Russia fall into this category. Now, let's talk about boundaries. There are three main types: physical, cultural, and geometric. Physical boundaries follow natural features like rivers, deserts, or mountains. The Andes Mountain divided by Chile and Argentina, for example. Cultural boundaries are drawn based on language, religion, or ethnicity. Think of how India and Pakistan were split up based on religion. Geometric boundaries. These are often straight lines drawn without regard for natural or cultural features, like the U.S. and Canada border at the 49th parallel. But borders aren't always peaceful. Boundary disputes can emerge over where a border lies, who owns what, or how land is used. Conflicts like Israel, Palestine, or India and China stem partially from these tensions. Some regions remain frontiers, areas where no state has full control. These are rare today, but still exist, Antarctica being a good example.